It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means. Yes, sirree, Bob. It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. This week, starring the most handsome special guest we've ever had, Mr. Ralph Murphy. Yeah, direct from Music City, USA. Welcome to the big show, Ralph.
It is great to be here, Mike. It's always lovely to see you.
Well, he's seen me since last night. He's been staying at our house, and we just spent a wonderful 4 or 5 hours out on a golf course this morning. And boy, that golf really takes it out of you. I got to say, we're both a little worse for the wear.
But you haven't lost your championship style. You know, it's still, hey, it's still what it is, you know.
I am not a great golfer. I'm okay. Never break 100 on a big boy course, and Ralph is better than I am, and my son-in-law Hayden went with us, and it's just a lovely day, and we're doing it again tomorrow. So I'm always glad because twice a year I get to spend 2 quality days with Ralph. We've known each other since literally like a month before Taxi became a real business. We were introduced at South by Southwest.
South by Southwest.
Ralph was sitting down with Todd Brabeck, getting ready to negotiate his deal to become vice president of ASCAP, and our mutual friend Lenny Caligo butted right into that meeting and said, "Ralph, you need to know this guy.
You need to meet this boy."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ralph was appropriately suspicious, and then kind of asked me all the right questions. Went, there may be something to this, and has been a great supporter of Taxis ever since. And he has been not only a dear friend to me, but a dear friend to our members. Every year at the Road Rally, Ralph spends an inordinate amount of time hanging out with members, listening to their music. And I mean, the guy's been a hit songwriter, a publisher. He's been in groups. If there's anything you can do in the music business other than be a music attorney, which he would never do because he's not slimy enough, he's done it all. So he brings all of those skill sets to bear for the musicians that meet him. And every year I get a ton of people coming up to me at the end of the rally. I spent 20 minutes with Ralph Murphy, and they love him, we love him, and so there you go. I see Scott Hansen is in the house, one of our members who owns a restaurant, and every Monday night when we do the show, he always says what the menu is at the restaurant. So yeah, send some over, Scott. We love some salmon.
Come on.
Actually, after the show, we're going out for sushi. So Ralph does something that I don't think anybody else in the industry does, which is he does a study every year analyzing the hits of the previous year. And which school do you do this in conjunction with?
Well, actually, I don't do it with any particular school. The interns come from Vanderbilt, Belmont College, from different universities. They're used at ASCAP and NSAI, and they do the analysis for them. They actually break down, get the lyric sheets and the tracks, and then I study them all. And the reason I do that is for me, simply because I'm a creator of works, and my job is to earn a living in this business.
So you are still doing stuff for ASCAP. You're in a consulting capacity for them.
Yeah, I have for the last 3 years.
And speak all over the world. I mean, the guy's he's always on an airplane. So, but you're writing again. You've gone back to being a songwriter, so that's why you're using it for you?
Pretty much full time.
Yeah.
Which is a joy because now I can implement it, which was originally what I started doing it for. I'd changed genre. I'd accidentally had a country hit. And we'd started a company there, Roger Cook and I, in
Picklick Music.
Picklick Music, right. And we had 1 or 2 hits. We had 3 hits actually, big hits. I wrote Half the Way for Crystal Gale, and then there was Talking in Your Sleep, and whatever. But I realized that I didn't understand the genre. And every other genre, like whether it be pop in England or rock in New York and dance in New York, I researched the genre. I understood it. Mm-hmm. There were certain things I really didn't understand. And so I got all the #1 records every year, and I would listen to them and see first use of the pronoun you, how they invited the listener in, what the structure of the song was, what the expectation of the listener of that audience was. And then you look at the gender of
Of
the
the
audience,
listener, right.
and then the time of day factor, because time of day is huge. 80% of country records are under 100 beats per minute, which means the heart rate is elevated, but they're not dancing.
Right.
So that means they're actually in their kitchen doing something, or
In
in
their
their car
Yeah.
driving. So it's got to accommodate that. And then you look at pop, the number one pop songs. Most of them traditionally have been over 100 beats per minute, which means they're being used to dance.
Mm-hmm.
And then you watch the heart rate go up. It's about 9 years ago. Lady Gaga, Beyonce, everyone worked at 120 beats per minute. Okay, that went to 124. Then it went to 128. And that's kind of been the gold standard. Then it went to 133 with Gangnam Style,
Right.
because the heart rate is being elevated, the caffeine and sugar. It has now gone to, last year, there were 11 number one pop records. 3 of them were 140 beats per minute or more.
Is it going to keep escalating to the point where we all have, bursting blood vessels? I mean, how high can it go?
Well, the other fascinating thing, and I don't know what this is, but 50% of the songs in pop, number ones, I'm talking about number ones.
Right.
And the reason I only ever study number ones is because I wouldn't go to the Olympics to win bronze.
Right.
I wouldn't go there to win silver. I'm so dysfunctional, I've got to go for gold.
A lot
So-
of people say they'd be happy, aren't they looking for album cuts? No, they're looking for hits.
They're lying. Come on. Of course. Oh, gee. You know what's the funny thing? Because I'm one of the I'm the official old guy now. All right. And I've seen most of my dear friends come through town who are very successful now. And the first thing they always say is, "Oh man, if I just had a cut."
Yeah.
And you go, okay. Then they get the cut. They say, "Oh man, if it was just a single," so they get the single. And then they say, "Oh, if it would only just go on the top 100, I'd be over the moon. That would be it for me."
Yeah.
It goes on the Hot 100. They go, "Well, if it would just top 70," and then it goes top 70, and it goes top 50, and then, if it was, and then when it's top 20, then it goes top 5.
Right.
And then they say, "Well, if it would just go a little higher," and then it gets to number 2. And I've
Whoa.
had number 2 records.
Yeah.
And I hate number 2 records because they sit there and they don't go to there. And then the unfortunate thing is as well, they're addictive.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you want when you have a number 1 record is another number
Of
1
course.
record.
Yeah, because you've proved that you can reach that level.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is to only ever have one number 1 record, because then it was kind of like you got lucky.
Right.
The number of writers that I'll take out when they have their second number 1, and you kind of sitting there having lunch and celebration, and it's really cool. And then I'll kind of look at them and go, "So how does it feel?" And they'll go, "Really good."
Yeah.
Because they broke that challenge. They managed to get it the second time. Once you form a pattern of crafting hit songs, once you understand your craft, the only thing that will separate you from having hits are vocabulary and technology. It's always about that. The same craft that I learned back in 1803, when I first was instructed in craft and finally understood that it wasn't about me, it was all about the listener, and my job was not to give the listener me, but my job was to give the listener them as I saw them.
Right. You want them to look in a mirror.
Yeah, I want it to be all about them, because every single song everyone ever fell in love with was always about them. It wasn't about somebody else. It was always about them.
Mm-hmm.
They fell in love to it, fell out of love to it, danced to it. Anyway, I've gone on and on about this, but in the book, the most important part of the book,
The book, which, by the way, we don't have a copy of, unfortunately.
Yeah.
My copy is at home because it got hijacked by my daughter Hannah, and Ralph had some in his suitcase. We were in such a hurry to get here after playing golf today that he forgot to bring his copies. So Sarah will put a link to where you can buy Ralph's book at murphyslawsofsongwriting.com. But yes, go ahead,
Right.
sir.
But the most important part of the book is the checklists and stuff, which I still use. I'll come back from a writing trip somewhere, and I'll look at the pieces of work, the stuff I've turned out, and then I'll get my checklist out. 60 seconds, first use of title, the use of the pronoun you. Did I invite the listener in? The song is a script. Does it make the singer look good to women at worst time of day possible? Because your audience is always predisposed to hate you. They didn't tune in for new music. You don't go looking for new music at 7 in the morning.
Let's talk about that. We were talking about that at the house the other night, that people want what is familiar. You're currently reading a book.
Oh yeah, the habits, how to build habits, and it's a Pulitzer Prize. It's a New York Times bestseller, and there was a chapter in it on music. Basically saying that people, even though you ask them about it, say like ABBA, the success of ABBA, they go, oh, ABBA, I really hate that, blah, blah. They have the most incredible run. They've had 40 years of hits. And every time ABBA comes on, people want to hear it. Now, maybe you really, and most 50% of people will say, oh, I don't really care about that. But they tolerate it, and it makes them feel good, and it makes them feel silly. And feeling silly is kind of good. Simple is hard.
So this goes along with what I've said to you guys in various writings and probably on episodes of Taxi TV, is that given the chance, would you rather create something totally new and become the next Beatles or the next groundbreaking thing, or push the envelope a little bit out to the edges, like a 15% fresh look at what's already out there and familiar? You say, after reading this book and because of your natural intuition,
Right.
push the envelope and just change, improve what's out there now, rather than trying to come up with something, because radio won't want it because it'll be too different, and the listening audience, apparently, from what you've learned from this book and intuited on your own, listening audience won't want it.
No, they really will not. If you look at, say, Shakespeare, all stage plays are basically the same: a beginning, a middle, and an end. Introduction to characters, subplot. When you go to school to learn how to write scripts, movie scripts, all movies are exactly the same. You have an expectation when you go to see a movie that it's going to be exactly the same. Introduction to characters, subplot. All that information is fed to you as a constant.
In a structure.
Yeah, in a structure. Now, all movies are different. There's some are animated, some are chick flicks, some are war action figure things, but they all have a constant in as much as they invite you into that equation. The only time they don't, they're called quote unquote art films.
Right, which nobody sees.
No, they play to 150, 200 people, and that's just as valid. It's really cool. I have a load of dear friends. I look at the people like John Prine and Guy Clark and wonderful writers who write for 10 o'clock at night. And when they go there, those people are prepared to sit there and want them to sing about relationships and do 18 verses and or do whatever, because they're invested in them. At 7 in the morning, do I want to hear that? I'm not sure. I think I would rather have something lighter, something that resonated with me, that made me feel good. Number one, I tune in for local news, local weather, local traffic, and a familiar song. I want something that I've had a good association with. And the singer better be a winner. I don't want a loser at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Or a victim, right?
Or a victim. And also, it costs $1,100,000 to put a single out and promote it and tour support and video and whatever. Would you spend $1,100,000 on a script that made your singer look like a loser to people at worst time of day possible?
No.
You wouldn't. It's a bad business decision. So, anyway, yes.
I know that I'm going to get emails from people saying, you guys are such whores, it's all about business. What about the art? What about the craft? I always tell them one doesn't preclude the other.
No.
You can, Ralph is a talented, legitimate hit songwriter. And he played me something last night that was a dancey pop song. I almost fell out of my chair going, "You wrote that?" Because it's very out of character for him. But he is going after what the market is asking for. But yet, that wouldn't stop you from writing something that was just a song that you had in your heart.
No.
It's not a zero-sum thing like it's one or the other. It can be both. But if you want to earn an income,
Yeah.
you make a better bet by giving the audience what they
Yeah.
want.
Well, for me, 50% of what I write is for me. It's cathartic in nature. It really, and I play those at say the Bluebird Cafe or Douglas Corner or wherever. I'm playing there in I guess about a couple of weeks' time. And I always play those songs, but the important thing is you have to start with a hit and end with a hit. And all in the middle, you can sandwich all the things which are relevant for 10 o'clock at night, which will resonate with people, which will just make people weep. But those are not the things that you're going to put bread on the table with.
Yeah.
They're just not going to function.
And the business is harder than ever. So if you want to put bread on the table, you gotta. I mean, look at the great tennis players or golfers. Not only are they really good at their sport, they're good with their personality and their image. They understand that there is a formula to becoming a recognized world champion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you don't have a personality, rent one.
Okay, so let's get back to the study of the hits of 2013. What is the most common song form?
The most common song form, and I'm glad you said the word song, because there are dance tracks which are electronic dance tracks, usually running everywhere, anywhere between 120 to 145 beats per minute. Those are dance tracks. And sort of like disco in the 70s and 80s, you can make that 9-10 minutes long. You can extend it. You can play with it. Those are designed for a club setting. Yes, they become number one.
But it's a radio edit.
But it's a radio edit, which they reduce it down in size. The songs, if you look at Lord, Royals, if you look at Wrecking Ball, those are written in exactly the same structure as Carly Rae Jepsen, Call Me Maybe, We Are Never Getting Back Together Again. Literally, within 1 minute and 4 seconds, 1 minute and 5 seconds, they've used the first use of title. They've used the pronoun you to invite the listener in. They all, around 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 15 seconds, get to what they call a 2-minute wall, where the listener gets bored at worst time of day possible. The big hits of any, like in songs, as opposed to tracks, dance tracks. Harlem Shake is a great dance track. It is wonderful. You can't sit still. It's rocking. But it's not a song.
Yeah.
It's a different animal. And so if for me as a songwriter, and I'm looking at, say, an up-tempo boy band thing, or it's got to be a dance track, I'm looking at 128 to 140 beats per minute. I'm looking at fourth form, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, small vestigial bridge, little breakdown, at 2-minute wall, and then on. Now they can make that longer or shorter. They can make it 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes long if they wish, if they choose. But my job is to talk to the listener about the listener.
Your job as a writer.
And my job as a creator of that script, to make that singer look really good to that audience that is going to listen to it. And also the important thing is the time of day factor. If this is going to be a dance thing, I've got all the time in the world, because it's dependent on 12 to 15 second increments of sound bites, moving things in and out and making things happen.
Layers of instruments added
Yeah.
and subtracted to bring the dynamics up or down and keep the interest level.
Yeah, and also the equipment used, synthesizers go in and out of fashion. Electronica go in and out of fashion. Something was, that's so 6 months ago, but that's got nothing to do with the song. The other thing that you look for is verbiage. You look for phrases, common phrases. What I spend a lot of my time just hanging out in the airports and just going to clubs and listening to the way people speak. And then I've got my little iPhone and I make a note of it. Turns of phrase that they just, man, it just blows me away. I
Which
go,
you,
"Ooh."
by the way, I should mention. Last night, Ralph showed me on his iPhone. He's got hundreds of titles for future songs.
Oh,
Every
yeah.
time something pops in his head, you guys have heard me mention this on the show, where you're watching a TV show and somebody's got a great line. Write it down. Keep it in an organized place where you can always find it. Ralph's got hundreds,
Yeah.
so that if he wakes up one day and has a writing, block of 4 hours to write, and you're stumped, you just scroll down that list and go, "I like that one."
Yeah, or I'll throw it out if I want to lure the people into a writing situation, like, oh, okay, how about butterflies are green, or don't mess with my pig, or whatever it is, the titles, and you go through them, and finally someone will go, oh, hey, that's interesting, and then you'll talk about it, and you'll try to envision a situation where that would be the resolution of the idea, and then you start creating it, and even then, in a lot of cases, it will be only good.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't need another good song. I call it the ooh factor. When you hear a song, go, ooh, man, play that again. That's what you want to hear.
The misconception is that people in the industry want to keep you out. No, they're desperately looking for the ooh factor.
Oh, yeah. If someone lays a song on me that blows me away, the first thing I'm going to do is call someone and say, man, you know why I want to call someone and tell them, lay that song on them? Because by me doing that, it would make me look good. It would make me look smart. If I played you a song, you went, holy shit. I mean, there was a song many years ago. I played you Kurt Lagenberger. Oh, and
I've played this on Taxi TV a bunch of times. It's
Yeah.
one of the greatest piano vocal demos I think ever
Yeah.
done.
And but see, by hearing something and being blown away by it, just amazes me. I remember turning on. This is about a year and a half ago. Passenger, and You Let Her Go, which I had heard came out of Australia, and it'd gone to #1 there, and I started listening to it, and I told everyone about it, and I don't think it really did well in the United States, but it was perfectly written, and it was done in a rondo structure, which is an old-fashioned structure, which I use in the book. I mentioned this, the sixth structure. Good Morning Beautiful was written in that. But.
Let's go back to collaboration and co-writing for a minute. I think that a lot of our members who are paying attention have come to realize the value in collaboration and co-writing, whether it's instrumental or songs. And the internet has certainly facilitated a lot of that. And this community has facilitated a lot. People meet people on the forum and what have you. So in a typical professional songwriting, let's meet Tuesday morning at 9:15, and we've got 3 hours booked to write together. How does it start and how does it progress? Does it start with each of the two parties, assuming it's just two people in the room, tossing out ideas, titles for ideas until one or the other goes, I really like that one? Is that typical?
Well, it is. Especially if someone's flying in to write with you. In most cases, you get to know the person. You go and break bread with them. You can have breakfast with them. You can have a lunch with them. You have a coffee with them. And you talk about their situation, who they are. You kind of get to know them.
How can you do that? The reason I ask that question is for a lot of these guys, they're collaborating from continent to continent, or at least town to town, city to city. So maybe what you're saying is hang out on Skype together and talk about, my wife just had knee surgery or my daughter just left for college, and get to know the person so that you maybe understand what's going to resonate with them or what you can pull out of them.
I use Viber a lot, which is a free service, and as long as you have internet,
I've never used it. Tell us about it.
Oh, Viber? It's just going. It's a free app. You just get it, and you can call Europe. You can also go to iTunes, and you can actually buy. And it's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
But whatever system you use, and there's loads of them.
So is Viber like?
Viber, yes. Really cool.
It's like oh God, I'm drawing a blank. Skype.
Yeah, it very much so. But it's not a visual.
Okay.
You can get it on there. Me, I just talk. Mainly because I'm old fashioned. I really would like to meet that person and just look in their eyes before I start working with them. Now, whether that means them coming to see me or me going to see them, um, there's cheap airfares, and it's worth it to me to invest myself. The only thing I've got to invest is me.
Hmm.
And why don't I invest that in those people? You know, I can go somewhere. I can go to London, or I can go to Dublin, or I can go to Toronto, or I can go to Vancouver, or I can come to Los Angeles, and sit and meet with 8 or 10 of them. I mean, there's NSAI chapters. Come to the Taxi Road Rally. I mean, goodness. I mean, I see so many people, and there are loads that I would love to write with, but it's just a time factor. I really don't have that much time. I mean, there are so many things. The ASCAP Expo this
Right.
week.
I mean,
You have to be present to win. I've got to, and that's really an awful thing to say, but
no, it's not.
you really do have to be present to win. You can't phone it in, you can't mail it in, you can't Skype it in. After you start the song, yes, you can. Now, I will finish up things that I've started in different countries or people have come in, and then we'll carry on and we'll tweak it. I got one 7:30 this morning from Ireland that I've been working on with a young gentleman there who's got a record deal. In fact, has a hit album over there.
You were talking to me on the golf course. Actually, you said I heard you speaking with Hayden, saying that you'll write a few days a week, and then you spend the rest of your time working on production or fleshing out stuff that you've already started.
Right.
But you're chameleon-like in that you will do a dance pop record. People think of you as a country guy because you've had country hits, because you live in Nashville and you run in that pack of wolves. But you extend yourself far beyond that genre. Uh, do you? You don't program synthesizers. You don't
No.
program beats. So how do you translate? This is a big question our members have.
Okay.
Taking my strummy 4/4 acoustic guitar vocal demo and getting that turned into something that sounds contemporary because it's got a contemporary beat, it's got a contemporary lyric, which is different from an old lyric, a contemporary melody. Everything has changed. Maybe not dramatically, but the envelope gets pushed by 15% and then another 15%. How do you relate to that world, stay on top of it, and find the resources vis-a-vis other writers and producers that you work with to bring what they do best and combine it with your acoustic guitar vocal song?
Okay. Well, first of all, you look at what is successful and the beats per minute.
Okay.
And one of the easy ways to do it is just set up a metronome at 128 beats per minute or 135 beats per minute, and then kind of speak it down and see the way it falls. Also, if you're dealing in Europe, if you're dealing in the United States, there's a vocabulary that comes with that particular genre.
Okay, let's talk
And-
radio pop genre in the
Okay,
United
radio
States.
pop. What I would look for, because I've got all the craft thing down. I've got the use of pronouns. I've got all the structures down. I'm going to look for a track person. I'm then going to look for a singer who knows the way she would or he would say something.
Mhm.
Because I will say, "That's why you love me." Say, "No, I wouldn't say that, man. I would say blah blah blah." And you go, "Ooh, cool. Okay, blah blah blah." Then you insert that. Then that singer has invested his or her personality into that. And what you do,
Do they become a co-writer at that point because
Oh,
maybe
oh.
they changed some stuff
oh
around?
yeah, if they're invited into that. First of all, when you go into a room with 3 people, there are effectively 3 co-writers in that room.
Even if somebody's only making the tea that day, because you
even-
never know that next
yeah.
time you could be making the tea
Yeah.
and they have the big
Oh,
contribution.
so literally, sometimes I've gone in with the title and they've gone, "Ooh, got it," and I've just, but what? And I haven't really contributed much of anything. And then other times, someone's just sat in the room and said, "Can I get you another cup of tea?" And I'll go, "Oh," and they go, "I don't know about that." I go, "You're right," and I will change it and rewrite it. It doesn't matter. that song would not exist without the chemistry of those people being there in that room.
And that's why when you go to award shows, you see 12 writers going up to the stage to accept, especially in the urban market, which I always
Yeah.
giggle, but I do understand why it's happening.
Right.
So,
Well, see, you've got to remember most of those songs are attitude songs as opposed to songs.
well, let's talk about that then,
Like
because,
Harlem Shake.
yeah, you know, you come from a world where it's inviting the listener in, giving them a lot of detail,
Mhm.
and telling a story with a beginning and a middle and an end. The song you played me last night, not the singer-songwriter thing, but the
Mhm.
top 40 thing, very atypical for what I've always thought of you
Right.
as a writer. What's the difference between writing the beginning, middle, and end, inviting the listener in, giving the detail, all that stuff? Does any of that stuff get pushed out or
No.
changed when you're writing for top 40 because
No.
it seems shallower?
No.
The stuff that I hear on the radio is, you know, move me, groove me. I'm over exaggerating, but you know, it's not a Nashville level hit songwriter crafted lyric that is. They're not that good. They're certainly different.
Well, they're different, and different doesn't mean
What's-
bad or wrong.
Yeah.
Different just means different. I mean, my early hits in 1860s, back in the 60s in Europe, were a lot of it was pop and rock. And then I moved to New York, and I had a lot of rock. I had April Wine, Mash McCann, a lot of heavy metal. Um, and I had a dance label as well, hardcore records.
Ralph Murphy doing heavy metal. Love it.
No, I was a headbanger. That was my, I loved it. I loved volume. I loved everything about it until I was so successful that it wore me out. I was doing like 11 or 12 album tracks a year, or whole albums a year, and I reached a certain age. I realized I could not physically do it.
So
Physically do it.
let's go back to the difference between writing
Mhm.
a ballad or writing a Nashville country hit and writing a top 40 radio hit. What is different about writing the lyrics for the U.S. top 40 radio hit?
Well, first of all, you're dealing a lot more in open vowel sounds. A, E, I, O, U.
Interesting.
You're still going to be using the pronoun you to invite the listener in. You're also going to use a lot more call and response.
Okay.
Yay, oh, yay, oh. Call and response is a major portion of number one pop songs. It has become much more a feature of country songs too. Barefoot Blue Jean Night, yo, oh. I mean, they're using a tremendous amount of it. The thing that separates country from pop, again, you see, I've been very successful in all genres, so I have credibility in all genres. I'm not saying just dropping in, oh, I think I'll write a pop song, because I've had big hits as a pop writer. I have credentials as a rock writer. I have credentials because I'm older than mud.
Well, I was going to go there, and not to be ageist about it, you know, but you're not a 25-year-old writer, but yet you hang and write with guys. You know, I mean, Ben Charles, I know, is a friend of yours, and he's very successful in the pop market with a bunch of Disney stuff.
Yeah.
So, how is it for you as a guy who's old enough to be his dad? To get somebody interested, how do you telegraph to them, I'm aware of your world and can write, you know, for today's market, you don't have to be 25 to do that.
Right. Well, my role in the creating process is not to dictate vocabulary. It is not to dictate the sound. Mine is to keep it in a shape that will resonate with the listener.
And do you have to act as the captain of that ship of keeping it in shape because the kids today are more beat in vocabulary, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, blah, blah. It's a throwaway. Because their skill set is different and oriented differently. So they benefit by having somebody holding the wheel of the ship going,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. Have the call and response, but we should also have a B verse leading into it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like being a director in a weird kind of way.
Mhm.
You take these wonderful ideas, and like a great singer, a guy or a girl, will suddenly put a three-syllable word in a two-syllable whole,
Mhm.
and you go, no, whoa, that violates the rule of accessibility, which invites the listener in. If they can't sing it, then it's exclusionary. You can't do that. Well, that's what I want to say. Well, let's find another word that resonates with you that has two syllables.
Mhm.
And we'll spend half an hour going over words, and finally they get it and go, oh, yeah, that's so much better. Because it's just my role is really to make them shine,
Mhm.
just to make them the best ever, because it's I love it. I love my industry. I love the music, and I love so many different genres. I'm a hit whore. I'm a song slut.
Hit whore.
I love wonderful, wonderful songs.
One of the things I sent out in the email was which topics are most prevalent. Have you seen a lyric theme and topic, song topic shift in contemporary hit radio pop? And if so, what give these guys some ideas on the types of topics? Obviously, you're not going to give them, specifics like, my dog bit my left calf this morning. Where should they be topically for the listeners? Because you want to speak to your audience.
Well, it's always about love. It's either in country, it's really easy. It's either about love of country, love of family, love of each other. In pop, and it's a dear friend of mine, I think Jay Frank,
Oh, yes.
who is a dear friend of ours, said there are really only four topics in pop. Wow, I'd like to do ya. Jeez, I'm doing ya. Wow, I'm tired of doing ya. Let's party. Those are the four. Whereas where you get into country, and there's a whole different range of emotions. My friend Alan Shamblin, who wrote This Old House, he spent like 4.5 years, and actually I think did 3 or 4 demos, rewrote it 3 or 4 times to make sure it was right. And we did an interview program a while back, and I interviewed him just because there were so many things in here. By the way, one of the key elements that made him successful was, I said, now you were born in Tennessee, but then you moved to Texas, and you were living in Texas. Why not Austin?
Yeah.
Why come to Nashville, Tennessee, rather than going to Austin, Texas? Because Austin's a big music town. And he said, well, all my friends, Lyle Lovett had moved to Nashville. Rodney Crowell had moved to Nashville. Obviously, there was something going on there that I need to go. And I said, well, you came, and I think he was a UPS guy, actually. He worked for
Which
UPS.
we were talking about over a beer after golf.
Yeah, and he showed up to write, I think, to co-write with Don Schlitz in his UPS uniform, because he didn't have time to change. And I said, what if there's one thing that you would think of that made you attractive, that a publisher would want to put writers with you? And he said, real easy. He said, titles. I had all these song ideas. He said, because I set a discipline for myself. I mean, it was like Hemingway. Every day he would sit in front of that typewriter and put a sheet of paper in there and come up with something. Well, he said, I had boxes of like song verse choruses. Boxes of them. So I'd go into a co-writing thing, and I said, how about da da da? And they go, I don't think so. Go, okay, how about ba da ba da ba? I don't think so. How about ba da ba? And he became known as the ideas man.
Wow.
People wanted to write with him because he walked in with ideas.
And what a great asset to have, because you can't have a song without an idea. You got to have a starting point, and that's a tough thing to come up with on a regular basis.
That's why. And the other good thing about your iPhone, it puts the date that you came up with that idea. And so when you actually put it down, I'll use my iPad and I'll sketch out a lyric, and that also has the date and the time you did it. So if someone says, oh, I already wrote that, and you go, well, no, I actually wrote that 4 years ago. Oh, you did. Oh, okay, fine. Anyway, no, but ideas. That's what it's all about.
I'm just scanning the
Uh,
chat room real quickly.
and I think we've pretty much peaked on beats per minute. I think uh, Locked Out of Heaven, Bruno Mars was 145 or 146, and that's
I thought we peaked at 120, so I wouldn't be surprised if it goes higher. Um, okay, so you said your analysis for 2013. I asked you, well, what is the analysis? And you said the listener and the dancer share the spotlight. I
yeah.
know we've touched on that, but can you crystallize that more?
Okay. Up until now in pop, there were 80% were above 100 beats per minute. This last year in 2013, for some reason, the 50% of there were 11 number ones, and 5 of the 6 were under 100 beats per minute, which means they were designed for radio
Mm-hmm.
because they're not dancing. Wrecking Ball is at rest. It's like 61, 62 beats per minute, which means it is designed for a listening audience, a viewing audience, which means that the Pandoras, the Spotify's, the whatever those radio things are making a dent
Yeah.
in the way people receive music.
Gets
And they're
them-
making a big dent at pop.
It gets them it makes songs familiar to them, which goes back to what we said at the top of the show, which is familiarity
Yeah.
breeds affection for
So,
the song.
so for me as a craftsperson, I really love it because, especially in pop, you're still working in a verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus. Strangely enough, 50% of all country records are written in the third form, which says in the book, which is verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus and out, or bridge, chorus and out,
Mhm.
whether you're operating in the United Kingdom or Europe or in the United States. But 50%, which actually comes with "Don't bore us, get us to the chorus," where they get in there real fast. Verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus and out, or bridge, chorus and out.
Let's talk about the number of lines that, well, for one thing, let's go to intros for a second.
Mhm.
Intros have never been shorter, in my opinion, than they
Mhm.
are right now. People want to get interested sooner, and DJs are no longer talking over an intro.
Mhm.
Um,
Almost.
almost what?
In country, they still have intros. They're still looking at 12 to 13 seconds. I mean, if you average it out, there's still these long intros. If you look at The Highway Don't Care, Taylor Swift and Tim McGraw,
Yeah.
that's a long intro. And those are designed for radio. For radio to now, the other thing they are doing, however, they are dead ending them.
What do you mean?
Well, when you stop a record, it makes the listener feel cheated.
Oh, you're talking button ending. Okay.
Yeah, just ding.
right, instead
dead
of
end.
fade. Yeah.
Whereas in country, they always used to fade them,
Mhm.
which automatically weans the listener off that song and moves them to the next song.
Right.
Now they're being designed as singles, and they dead end.
Remember, my daughter Hannah read that in Jay Frank's book. What's the name of his first book that was so wild?
Futurehit.dna.
Yeah, he mentioned not only button the ending or dead end the ending, but he mentioned don't sing the last line.
Mm-hmm.
Cut it off a line early, and Hannah did that with her song Suicide, and every single person that listened to that song a second time filled
Yes.
in the blank. And once you actually sing it, vocalize it,
Mhm.
it sticks.
Well, see, that's what call and response is all about.
Right.
Is getting na 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 na, hey hey hey. Once that person, that listener, sings along with you, they've physically bought into your premise.
Welcome to the
Welcome to the nanas.
welcome to the Hotel California.
Yeah.
Everybody sings that chorus. It's not call and response, but it is that kind
Yeah.
of chorus. So, pop. Let's go back to intros and pop. How long are they typically?
Pretty much zero start.
Okay, so like,
They're literally almost nothing.
so they come right in on the downbeat
Pretty
of the verse.
much, yeah. I mean, even Locked Out of Heaven. Well, yeah. I mean, and he does that sort of drum pattern in the beginning, but he's singing along.
And what about pre-choruses in the pop world?
All of every single, actually, I should be careful there, because there were two, roar and one other one, which kind of had like a two-line kind of climb. They lift you into the chorus. You have to do that, but they're not predetermined to be. Generally, when you're looking at a lift or climb or channel or ramp or pre-chorus, there's more names than I've got on Saturday night.
But they're all the same thing.
They're all the same thing. Pre-chorus, and in England and in Europe, they're called bridges.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
It's confusing when an American
vocabulary
writer,
wise, yeah. But they're generally where you find if, so, but, maybe, when.
Okay.
They create tension and they lift you melodically into that chorus. And if the classic example of that is Sarah Bareilles, Ain't Gonna Write You a Love Song.
Mm-hmm.
She used every single inch of that song creatively. There's different lifts and climbs because you can use them for new information.
Mm-hmm.
They don't traditionally. They'll don't you ever say I just walked away. I will always love you. That's the pre-chorus in Wrecking Ball.
Right.
I forget what the one in we will never be royals in the Lord record. Anyway, but it's generally, it creates tension and lifts you melodically. But whatever it is, the other thing, the interesting thing, and I had never noticed this before, and a dear friend of mine, Pat Alger, was talking about, because he's an old folkie, and he said, yeah, in choruses in folk, you go down, you descend on the last line. In pop, you go up. And I went, wow, I'd never really thought about that.
So what if you're an indie folk rock act? What do you do with that?
You can do anything you want because you'll probably be playing at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, there are groups. I mean, the Lumineers, people call them indie pop, indie rock, indie folk. I mean, those are clearly blurred lines, but a popular genre and a popular sound nonetheless. Are they using a different set of rules than a top 40 pop hit? I mean, they're getting played on top 40 radio, and that's where they're becoming hits. Is there a different set of rules for that? Because we get asked for a lot of that for film and TV because it's current and it's cool and it's hit.
Yeah.
What might the rules be for those?
You've got to remember, for film and television, they don't really want hit songs. They want songs that are not going to distract the viewer from what is going on screen.
Right, but I completely and utterly agree with you on that. But nonetheless, they will still use, Lumineers get used, for commercials or for TV shows and films, mostly expensive stuff, high budget stuff.
Right. But you're not going to be able to write that. You see, I'm a standalone songwriter.
Right.
My whole role is to either come in and write with the act for their project, or to have a song which is a standalone song used by those people.
Right.
If they're a self-contained unit, what does that mean to me? I can't write for them.
Okay, but let's say that they called you up and said, "Hey, Ralph, hi, we're the Lumineers. Can you come over and write with us?"
Sure. If they did that, they would want a hit. And I would bring my expertise. They would be inviting me into that equation to bring a hit and put it in the context of a hit. Maybe using their vocabulary, their sound, but they would be looking at having a hit. Well, I call them calling cards. And everybody has to have 2 or 3 calling cards. Mm-hmm. Those big songs that when you're advertising, going to be at Bridgestone Arena or going to be at Staples Center or whatever, they'll play those big hit songs. You'll hear Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Big Yellow Taxi, perfectly written songs that were big hits. They're not going to play the album cuts.
Neil might, but he's one of the very few.
Yeah, well, he's been around.
Yeah, that's just his way of doing things. Let's take some questions from you guys. So start spitting them out, and I'll ask Ralph one more thing while we wait for the delay from the chat to get the questions to us. melodically, what have you had to learn as an old school songwriter, training yourself, reinventing yourself, and moving yourself into the modern contemporary world? Have you learned anything from younger writers or from your analysis and listening to the hits of 2013 melodically that you've had to make a conscious decision? Oh, I shouldn't do that anymore. Maybe I should be doing more stuff like this.
Well, it's mostly in vocabulary. I will find I was writing with a young an Irish writer, um, 22, um, from actually Belfast, and he had some turns of phrase that I'd never really thought about it using, and they were magical. They were really really cool.
But were they melodically different?
No,
Okay.
melodically, no, they weren't, but the vocabulary was different, and I love when you get into a challenging vocabulary. I mean, I'm always reading at least one book a week, and I kind of look for the fringe books that just bring a different perspective to everything for me. I want to be challenged. I invite it. I want to be proven wrong because then I want to find out how they did it.
Right, because then you're learning something and adding a new layer of, to your skill set. But
I'm
melodically, we hear a lot. The reason I ask that question is we hear a lot of stuff come through from writers who are pretty crafty writers. And generally speaking, they're 40, 50, 60 years old. They've been doing it for a while and they've got some craft, but their stuff sounds dated. And the vocabulary thing is absolutely real, and I get that.
mm,
But it's pretty easy for us to go, oh, that, melodically, that sounds like a 70s hit. Um, are there bigger intervals today? Anything that you've had to learn or teach yourself about melodies, or do you just absorb it by hearing more hits?
well, one of the major things is less poetry, much much less poetry. Back in New York, the perfect rhyme was the king. I mean, everybody it's got to be a perfect rhyme, and I'm dealing with soft rhymes now all the time, and people are just blurring the lines between what rhymes at all, and then dealing with songs that don't rhyme at all. The key to every song is there has to be a little bit of melody there that invites the listener into it. But then when you actually come to the story, you remain linear anyway. You don't change your chord till you change your thought. And that has been a constant, that was taught to me by a man who's been dead for 15 years. Those were taught to me by, I mean, literally.
Hopefully, he taught you while he was still alive.
Oh, yeah, no. Sent from beyond the
Right.
grave, yes. No, I have learned so much, and I continue to learn. It blows me away, even in studying all the number one records every year. And a lot of people only ever have one hit and then go away. It was almost like that was their moment in the sun, their moment of magic. And what you have to do is learn by what they were saying and what they were doing, and their intensity and their passion. It's really really it's a lot of fun.
Let's take a couple of questions. Question from Jim Carvalho. I got a return. He means a taxi return today. How would you define a loosely constructive narrative? Can that be a hit? Do you mean, did the screener say to you? Of course, now the questions are pouring in. Going by so quickly, things are scrolling off. Did the screener say this was a loosely constructed narrative, and you want to understand what that means, Jim?
Well, a loosely constructed narrative means it wandered, and you really. Harlan Howard always said
It was a
something.
huge hit songwriter.
Yeah, he had 180 hits. He wrote everything, or at least he told me he wrote everything. He said, "You know what we do, pal?" I said, "No, Harlan. What do we do?" He says, "You tell him, then you tell him you told him, then you remind him you told him. You can't wander from one thing to another. It has to be linear." Matter of fact, one of the tips, and this is just a good little litmus test for you. Look at your title and look at the first four lines. If those first four lines don't lead you directly to the title, you failed. Because it's called creating an expectation than fulfilling an expectation. You've got to do that. I was heading for Norway a couple of years ago, and I wanted to illustrate that. And I studied number one songs, and sure enough, the first four lines, there were things in there that led me directly to that title, either whether in contrast or to amplify it.
We see a lot of songs where somebody will introduce a line that says, you told me you don't love me anymore. And the screeners will say, you haven't identified who the you is that told you that they don't love you anymore. And I know Nashville publishers are fanatical about that stuff, and writers know to not make that mistake. Our members get really ticked off at the screeners by that. Like, come on, I can point to a million examples on radio. And you probably can. Some stuff becomes a hit because it's got an infectious beat and an infectious melody. Something about it made it a hit, and maybe the craft on the lyric side wasn't there. But better to have it than not. So why is it so important that the listeners know who the you is that you're talking about? That's part of the narrative.
Well, it's very simple. Chekhov. Chekhov was a brilliant writer and a brilliant teacher. And he said, you never have a loaded gun in Act 1, Scene 1, unless you fire it before the end of the play. It's an unexplained detail, an unexplained relationship. But one of the things I always look at, because women physically buy 50% of all records made and make men buy the other 50%, as I've said many, many times, and that's my target group. If two women go and have lunch and one sits down and says, he left me, the other one, was he working out? Has he lost weight? Has he sold his car? Has he moved yet? Has he had a haircut? They want to know everything that goes with, he left me. Two men go out and have lunch, and one sits down and says, wow, she left me. The other one goes, that's a drag, have a beer. End of conversation. So you better explain everything. Remember, you are creating someone that never existed in a place that never was, doing something that never happened, and making me believe it in 60 seconds. That is your job, and you chose that job. And
I'm trying to, these are going by so quickly. So, is a song for film necessarily too vague to be a hit? That's a good question. Martians on Maui says, so is a song that's written for film, too vague to be a hit because it doesn't have the detail? Think about the song you played me last night, and I said the slow acoustic guitar vocal thing, and I said that would be great for a montage, at the end of a show. Is that kind of song too vague to be a hit?
The chances are that it probably will not be. And I mean, I wrote it, and it was really lovely, and it was a wonderful moment. But I'm going to be looking for a film and television placement for that. It doesn't, because something isn't a number one record, doesn't mean it's invalid. It means it's like if you've got a racehorse, you wouldn't have it pull a cart.
Right.
You'd have a burro or a donkey pull that.
You're still going to need another beast of burden to pull the cart.
Yeah, it's just horses for courses. Some run well in the rain, some don't at all.
Ralph, how does the trend towards streaming music affect songwriting? That's a good question.
Well, generally, unfortunately, although you can't make a copy, the very fact that it's available and free and cheap, and very, very cheap, really devalues the song. To me, a song is worth 99 cents. A song is worth whatever, especially if it's something that speaks to me, about me, or a situation I heavily identify with. That is really worth it. And there's so few jewels that you ever create that are wonderful. You should be celebrated, and you should be compensated for that.
Is there a place for verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, verse, chorus? That's confusing. You had me with the verse, chorus, bridge, and then chorus, but not with the extra verse, chorus at the end in country.
No, there was one last year, and it was written by a friend of mine, which had an extra verse, chorus at the end. But it's kind of the evolution of the song. In AABA, which is fifth form, they started adding another A section. And that started about 7 or 8 years ago. Keith Urban did that. That happened twice.
Why? The story needs one more verse to
Yeah.
explain the.
Well, no, what you didn't have was enough song.
Okay.
You probably had cheap little verses or like little diddly verses, and suddenly you were at 2 minutes and going, whoops.
Right.
So then
We didn't tell the whole story.
Yeah, and so you need to go and put another verse on there.
Can you, this is from Smudge, can you define hooks and give examples of great pop hooks and how we can employ these as songwriters? It's pretty basic, but a very critically important question.
Satisfaction, Roar, Wrecking Ball, We Will Never Be Royals. We Are Never Getting Back Together Again. Call Me Maybe. Those are pretty basic. I'm at the ASCAP Expo. I do the Murphy's Law, and I put in all the things that happened last year, and using the rhyme scheme as a tool, and also you've got to remember that it's very, very important in the internet age. It is so very important that there is no ambiguity, that your title is the destination, that it is set up and set up well, so that when the person, after one time of hearing that, does a Google search, they know the title they're going looking for, because there's a big pushback. If you don't find that, you kind of feel like, oh, they didn't want me to find it, so to heck with them. And you don't want any pushbacks. What you've got to do is invite the listener in. No one's doing you any favors. No one's inviting you to the dance. The phone did not ring some years ago and saying, oh, you've got to be a songwriter. If it did, you're delusional. That did not happen.
Let's see. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but not all technology is good. Gadget addiction destroyed the music industry, and in Australia last year, teenage suicide rate increased. That's not a question.
You're reading there, Michael.
I am reading. I'm trying to find something that's like a full question. Ralph, there's a good one. How has phrasing changed in modern songs?
Well, it has become a lot more staccato, and I think that's a direct result of rap.
And beats in general, yeah.
Beats in general, which is fascinating when you actually try to get that down. And one of the great things to do is just set up a click track and speak down over click track and try to jam as many words as you can in there so they feel comfortable.
There's no question that people are not, da 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 da.
No.
They're putting more words per line in. They're using soft rhymes, things that are really soft rhymes. I can't think of a good example, but I heard one the other day. Why that was pure friggin' genius, because it was like, oh, I can't even think of it, but two words that you would never find. I'm a really big fan of Master Writer, and I'm a huge fan of Master Writer, and as big a fan as I am, I remember hearing that line and going, even Master Writer, as incredibly comprehensive as that is, wouldn't have had that soft rhyme in there.
Yeah.
But it worked. And it worked so well that it got your attention and made you love the song a little more.
Mm-hmm. Use whatever you can find. Every once in a while I'll be reading a book and there would be just lines in there that I'll mark the page.
Yeah.
I'll keep the book, and if it resonates with me, and then it finds its way into my telephone, and then ultimately finds its way to something else. I love everything. Going to films, going to movies, just seeing what they say on screen.
I've got to see if I can find something quickly on my phone. I don't want to dilly-dally on camera today, but let's see. Voice recorder, where are you? Okay. So I was sitting in the parking lot on February 8th of 2013, and no, that's not what I wanted to play. I don't know how to get
We
to the rest
almost
of it.
found something really good there.
Yeah. Anyway, I can't find it, but yes, oh, there was a list. Shoot, voice recorder list. Um, okay, March 11th, 2013.
I want to play my favorite song. I want to hear my favorite song.
So I hear stuff as part of other people's songs on the radio. I'm sitting in the car waiting for Hannah to come out of some team gathering she was at.
Right.
And I heard a line, I want to hear my favorite song, I want to play my favorite song. And I went, okay, maybe you could build a song around that. So I'm not even a songwriter, but I do it. You know, it's everywhere if you're looking for it.
Oh, it is. And what you do is whenever you're in a co-write situation, someone say, I want to hear my favorite song, I want to play my favorite song because my favorite song is you.
Yeah.
You know, just start, and then start playing with the lines and playing with the words until something creative and different comes out. And it doesn't have to be radically different. All you do is you're looking for just something, ooh, wouldn't have said it quite like that.
Here's a really important question, and I know why this gentleman is asking it. Question: wouldn't half of the Beatles hits have been refused or rejected by the standards requested or recommended for today's music?
Yeah, because they're out of the structure. They're out of the format. They used I think they used 5 basic structures of the 6. The only one they didn't use, which is the 7th, the AAAA, basically basic structure. Yeah, I mean, yesterday I haven't heard an AABA song, Brown Eyed Girl. Yesterday, there were so many. They were still used in country up until 2 years ago, but they're not used at all in pop.
I think what this gentleman is, we get this question a lot from members that are stuck in the musical generation they grew up in, and it's like, yeah, the Beatles stuff wouldn't fly today. Well, you're right, it probably wouldn't fly. Fashions change. The Beatles, they're still extremely relevant and loved on a global basis by a large percentage of the population, but because of the familiarity factor. First of all, they were brilliant, they were groundbreaking, they were that rare example of somebody going beyond the 15%, pushing the envelope. They blew up the envelope, but they did take stuff from people that they loved and rolled it all into a stew and made something out of it. But yeah, you're right. That stuff would probably be turned down by A&R people today because it's not current. You wear different style shoes today than you did back then.
Yeah.
You drive a car that looks differently. Your taste in art that you hang on the wall in your home is probably different. The colors that you paint your walls, all these things change, but we do go back. Everything old is new again. There is definitely a fashion right now where people are retro inspired.
Yes.
A lot
I wish
of
I'd kept my old clothes.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm fashionable again.
Absolutely. And musically, yeah, we go back and we pull stuff, kind of the blues rock thing, that we see listings all the time where people want stuff that sounds 80s inspired, but it doesn't sound just like the 80s, but it may have a synth sound that harkens back to the 80s. So, but if you made something that sounded purely 80s, it wouldn't fly today in all probability because it would need a modern beat under it or the modern vocal phrasing.
Someone was bemoaning the fact that the Hammond organ is almost never used. And it's a brilliant, I never thought about it, but yes, the Hammond organ is almost never used anymore.
But it will be again someday.
Oh yeah, and real drummers will come back. I think real drums, I was doing a demo recently and I had a drummer who was really, really good, and he has a drum room, and we stacked different drums doing different patterns, and did like 3 different tracks of drums, and when I put them all together, it was really, really cool, and it was just so much fun working with the drum. I just laid out the beats per minute of the song and the structure, and he just rose, and it was like, wow, and this huge room just designed for drums.
Nice.
It was really a great afternoon. I loved it.
Since I've been a taxi member, I have not seen a listing for any Beatles type music. I'm guessing that's Scott answering the previous gentleman's question. Hey Ralph, how did you shoot today? How's the shoulder holding up? Great to see you in Nashville. It's from Robbie Hancock, who I'm guessing you know.
Yes, excellent. Good to see you, Robbie.
So, how'd you shoot today?
How actually okay. First of all, I never set out to be a great golfer. As long as I don't embarrass myself totally, and I have a lot of fun. I've learned a lot from Paul Williams. Paul Williams is really a funny man, and he's a lovely man, and he's a smart guy, and he takes his golf about as seriously as I take it, and we have a very good time, and it's one of the things I love about Michael. Things that you really don't have a super expertise in, don't place unnecessary burdens on yourself by requiring you to be really great. Just have fun, it's a game. Life is a game.
Speaking of things we're not really great at, yesterday, Ralph arrived at our house, but he'd been up since 1:30 in the morning LA time. So he said, hey, do you mind if I go up to my room and crash out for a while? I said, no, go for it. I'm going to go fly my plane. Well, there's a place that I fly out in the mountains about, I don't know, a mile or two from our house. And I went out there and ran into somebody that I know who also flies out there from time to time. We're chit-chatting. He's flying his quadcopter. I'm flying what's called a Bixler 2. It's about a 5-foot wingspan glider motorized plane hybrid. And I'm flying, and he's talking and he's watching because he busted a prop in his thing and he couldn't fly. And then I decided to bring it in for a landing. Well, I took it, I don't know, 200 yards away from me. And I decided to bring it in for a long glided landing. And I made a left turn around a giant oak tree, like a 35-foot oak tree. And then I realized I was coming in a little too low and decided to give it some gas. So I did it while when planes turn, they turn like this. And they want to go down. So you have to pull back on the elevator to keep them turning and bring it up. I didn't pull back on the elevator enough, and I parked my plane that I'm in love with 30 feet high in the 35-foot oak tree. And it is wedged right in the middle of the tree in big, thick branches. We tried throwing logs at it. We tried throwing rocks at it. That plane, about $200 worth of plane, is stuck there for the rest of its life.
Yes, we had to drive by there today to have a look at this legendary plane, which is indeed stuck in the top of the tree.
For life. There's a firehouse that's
yes.
about, I don't know, a mile away, and I'm tempted to ask the firemen to, you can't get, there's no easy access with a hook and ladder. But bottom line is I came home and immediately ordered $145 worth of parts to build another plane. But last night I did go to bed thinking about my poor little baby plane sitting up in the tree in the cold night all alone.
Boys and their toys.
Yeah, it's inanimate, but I love it. I said 2 model helicopters at dusk while I was jogging. They even had lights on the mini helicopters. Yep, I've got a little mini one that is, I'm looking for a size of a matchbook that's got LEDs on it, and it's a lot of fun to fly. What's the current, where'd that one go? What's the current trend in crafting instrumentals, song format, intro, verse? I'm going to take this one because I don't think Ralph lives in that world so much. Mm-hmm. The current trend in crafting instrumentals that get used in TV more so than film. I'm not talking about orchestral instrumentals so much as I am the stuff that you would hear, the twangy stuff on a Gator show, or the hip-hoppy stuff that you would hear on the Kardashians. Stuff like that is practically no intro, maybe no intro at all. If you do have an intro, literally like 2 bars. And basically they stick with a central melodic motif from top to bottom. There is sometimes an A section and a B section. The tempo will remain the same throughout, and how they make it interesting is by adding and subtracting layers. So the first 30 seconds could be 4 or 5 instruments, and then at the end of that you introduce a couple more instruments to the next layer, then you bring it back down, maybe even a rest, some sort of edit point, so that if the video editor or the music supervisor wanted to start it from that point forward, they could. So you almost have like fresh starts and stops throughout the song. And remember, add layers, then subtract layers. Almost always give them a buttoned ending on the end, and that's the formula.
How many time? How many seconds? 62 minutes.
Both of those are good numbers. I've seen listings lately where people have been asking for at least 30 seconds. Frankly, I prefer give them at least a minute with a buttoned ending. You could give them 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes they'll ask for stuff in song form, but it's rare. More often than not, they want stuff that gets right to the point, gives a central melodic theme. Stick with modern hip-hoppy beats whenever possible. That stuff is what, if I had to pick a type, the stuff with a hip-hop underlayment is what they're looking for. It could be an acoustic guitar over a hip-hop beat. And then introduce something else on top of the acoustic guitar for the next layer, but then bring it back down again in the buttoned ending, because they want ba-down, bum, with a little reverb trail at the end of that, because they're going to use that at the end of the scene, and then they're going to come in on the downbeat of the next instrumental when they cut from, you know, the scene in the kitchen on the Kardashians to pulling out of the driveway. Yeah. One of them is going to be tension music. Ooh, the family's fighting. It's comedic, and it has some tension to it. And finally, one of the girls gets pissed off at the mom, and she's going shopping in Beverly Hills to make herself feel better. So it's going to go from this comedic, pissed off, tensiony music to traveling music when the car pulls out of the driveway. It's a whole different world than regular songwriting. Here's a good question from Samuel Adams 77. Have you ever given away writing credit to an artist who didn't write just to get the placement?
I have not, but I know a lot of my friends have.
It's the way of the world these days.
Yeah, it would appear that is an ongoing pressure for writers. I kind of look at them like, you want to do what? There was a guy who wrote this song 3 years ago, he and his co-writer, and suddenly it is on the charts as we speak. And there suddenly appeared 2 other co-writers, one who happened to be a member of the band, and the other one was the producer. Were they happy about it? No. But that has appeared and seems to be a trend. I resist it or avoid it. However, if an artist changes significant portions of the song to personalize it and make it more in keeping with their own persona, then I'll look at it.
Here's a good question. Mainly for country writers, I'm pretty sure, although Nashville has a burgeoning band rock scene. Not that a lot of acts get signed out of Nashville for that stuff, but there are some really incredibly talented people doing it. How important is it to live in Nashville to be part of the country music songwriting scene?
Well, again, it is a very, very personable town. There are several restaurants where you turn up and you go to clubs. You see the showcase nights. You go to the Bluebird. You go to Listening Room. You go to Douglas Corner. You go to there are just so many of them. Losers, winners.
What don't you do? Tell them what germing is and how to avoid being a germ.
Oh, you don't go up to people and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. You know, I really want to write with you, and would you do this? No, you don't do that. You just turn up enough times, and so people can make up their own mind about you. You don't beat them up with well, hey, you've got to hear this. There was a gentleman about three years ago, and he stopped by the office to say hello, and I ran into him at a bar later, and I was having a drink with a couple of writers who were dear friends of mine. They're both in the Hall of Fame. And this writer came and said, oh, Ralph, I can see you again. Oh, hey, I've heard your songs with so-and-so, and we're going to be writing this time next year. And he looked down and went, no, we're not.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I was told by a very wise gentleman, one of the first times I went to Nashville in my capacity as the owner of Taxi, he said, look, when we go, the secret to Nashville is keep your head low. be humble, keep your head low, keep your ears open, keep your mouth shut, and learn. And that was such great advice. I have a lot of friends in Nashville, maybe more people who know me in Nashville than know me in New York and LA put together. And it's because I took this guy's advice. And I've always been grateful that he gave me that advice. You don't go to Nashville. I never went to Nashville and said, man, you should hear all the great country songs coming into Taxi. You wait for somebody to say, so do you guys ever find any good writers?
Mm-hmm. You're
Say,
invited in.
Yep, invited in. And then the answer is humble by saying, you know, I've heard some, but I'm not sure that my ears are as good as you guys who live on the row and do it for a living every day. But let me send you a couple to see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
They'll take those songs. But if you show up, you know, any one of the places Ralph is mentioning, or at the road rally, or anywhere, and this is true not just for country, but for other genres, other people in the industry as well. There's nothing they dislike more than somebody walking up and going, dude, you got to check out my new CD.
Yes.
Get into a conversation with them. How long did it take you when you got to Nashville before you felt like you actually knew what was going on here?
Mm-hmm.
How did people come to get to know you? What did you do to improve your craft? How did you support yourself when you were trying to break in as a songwriter? And they're going to tell you their story. You're going to learn from it. They're going to like the fact that you didn't push your music on them. And after 2 or 3 of those meetings over a period of a year, sooner or later, they're going to say, I'd like to hear what you're doing now and kind of hear what you're at. Maybe I can give you a pointer. Am I telling the truth?
Yeah, no, it is not what you can do next week or next month or next year even. This is a lifetime. You become a creator of works for a lifetime, and you have a lifetime. You can say, oh, if I don't make it by this time next year, I get people saying, I'm gonna move to Nashville and try it for 6 months. I'm like, well, don't bother. Just save your money. It's like me saying, I'm going to go to LA and try to become an actor. I'm spend 1 year. Well, in a year, you're just going to learn the ropes. It may be the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 10th year, you'll get something going. I've had some dear friends who have been 7 to 10. Matter of fact, I had a really great writer, had a huge hit 25 years ago. And he didn't have another #1 for 25 years. And he kept writing every day. He would different young teams would come to town, and he was rewarded. And matter of fact, I ran into him at his #1 party, and and Mark Irwin, actually.
Okay.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that, because he's now suddenly he's on 2 or 3 #1s. But he did not. He wrote "Here in the Real World," which was his first song with Alan Jackson, and he didn't have another one till "Highway Don't Care" with Tim McGraw and Taylor Swift, and 25 years. And he said to me, I guess I'm proof positive that in this town you don't have to have a great deal of talent. All you have to do is remain vertical. And
or in some cases, maybe horizontal.
Well, yeah, but no, he kept working and working. He was always involved with the Josh Kears and the Chris Tompkins. He was finding them when they were just beginning. He was always there as part of their world, and he really cared, and he grafted everything he did. He just really got involved with, and he's a lifer. And I'm a lifer. And
look at our mutual friend Randy Bachman.
Oh my God!
Yes. I met Randy when I was in the Benjamin Franklin Lightning Rod Society. We played for the opening on the Guess Who's first North American tour. They played Pit Sticks Dairy Lake outside of my hometown, somewhere in a cornfield, and then I met Randy again in the early days of Taxi, and there are years where, we see each other, years where we don't, but Ralph and Randy go way back, and they're dear friends. I know Randy well enough to call him at home and get him to take the call. Ralph knows him well enough to crash at his house. Randy Bachman has had 25 number one singles in his career.
Oh, he's been, yeah, it's huge.
I mean, Bachman Turner Overdrive and Guess Who. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
just taking care of business. Office Depot licenses that for a stupid amount of money every year, whether they
Yep.
use it or not, so that nobody else can use it in the off years. Randy has done very well for himself, didn't squander the money on hookers and drugs. He saved it and invested it and has done very, very well. The man is a writing fiend. Hasn't had a hit in years, but he is
He
the
will.
perfect example of what you're
He will.
talking about, because he goes to Nashville, camps out for a month. He goes to New York, camps out for a month. Goes to
Yeah.
LA, camps out for a month. Has people come to his house on an island off of Vancouver and write with him. He works at it every day, lives it and breathes it.
Yes. And he will have another hit. And it's just a matter of time.
Yep.
And I'm waiting. I've had a hit in 4 years now. Last hit, number 2 record with Cliff Richard I wrote with Paul Brady.
I remember that one. Yeah.
21st Century Christmas, and that was number 2 in England. I go, ooh, number 2. Anyway, I'm ready for the next number 1.
Okay. Do you recommend forming your own publishing company? Let's make this the last question. And keep the other 50% of royalty, or better to align with an established publisher early in your career in the day and age of the web? Taxi, YouTube. In the age of taxi, YouTube, the internet, how things have changed. So, do you recommend forming your own publishing company and keep the other 50% of the royalty versus just the writer share, but 50% of the publisher share? A lot of people think that if they form their own publishing company, this is my take on it. A lot of people that I've met seem to think that if, I've got a publishing company, like, we're much more interested in your song because you've got a publishing company. And what this gentleman is asking is, should I hold on to 50% of the publishing? Does that make them more attractive, less attractive, or does it really matter?
Well, you've got something to negotiate with. When I'm dealing with Europe, having a piece of publishing to be able to say, I can also slide you a piece of publishing, makes the song, there's definitely an edge to that. One of the things I always recommend is people set up a publishing company or set up their own, just do it as a DBA, doing business as. You don't need to register it and go through all that stuff. And it doesn't cost anything to do a DBA. But then get a little logo, get a letterhead.
Right.
And suddenly when you send your work in, it's on Wildebeest Publishing or whatever you choose to call it. And it just gives it looks a little more professional rather than just being a songwriter.
All right. Do you got that one already? Okay. Let's wrap it up because we've been going for an hour and a half. Again, I cannot recommend Ralph's book, Murphy's Laws of Songwriting, the book.
And by the way, when you go onto the site on Murphy's Laws of Songwriting, put in taxi and you'll get a $5 rebate.
Nice.
So it's just cheaper.
Cheaper is good. All right, so thank you. These guys always learn from you. I always learn from you.
I learn from them. I really do. It's what goes around comes around. And if you're at the ASCAP Expo on Saturday, this coming Saturday, 9:45 in the morning, I'll be doing the PowerPoint presentation of exactly what happened last year. So we'll have a template for what's going to come our way, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I will be at a wedding on Saturday, so I won't be there, sad to say. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Ralph, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
I will
Always
see
my
you
pleasure.
in 15 minutes for sushi, and then see you on the golf course in the morning. And I will see you guys next week on Taxi TV. Bye-bye, you guys.